The leather-clad gang members had turned the quiet gas station into their personal playground, intimidating customers and making crude jokes while blocking the pumps. But when they saw the beautiful woman in the wheelchair trying to fuel her car alone, they thought they'd found the perfect victim. She sat there calmly, her ocean blue eyes showing no fear despite being outnumbered 5-1. They saw weakness. They saw vulnerability. They had no idea they were about to face the fury of the United States Navy's most elite warriors, and that the small trident tattoo barely visible on her wrist marked her as one of the deadliest operators who ever lived. For more powerful videos about our military heroes, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue to tell these important stories. Jessica Martinez, 29 years old, sat quietly beside pump number 3 at Murphy's Corner Station, her Honda Civic positioned perfectly for refueling. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her piercing ocean blue eyes held a calm that seemed almost unnatural given the threatening atmosphere that had descended on the usually peaceful truck stop. She wore a plain white t-shirt and dark jeans, her lean, muscular frame still evident despite the standard black wheelchair that had become her companion 2 years ago. The chair was simple, functional, not the expensive racing model that screamed athleticism, but rather the kind that whispered of medical necessity and quiet adaptation to a changed life. What none of the leather-clad troublemakers now terrorizing the gas station had noticed was the small tattoo barely visible beneath the cuff of her shirt, an intricate Navy SEAL trident with the motto, "The only easy day was yesterday," etched in flowing script. It was faded now, like a secret from another life, but to those who knew how to read such things, it told a story of training that broke most people, missions that haunted the strongest minds, and a brotherhood forged in the world's most dangerous waters. Jessica had chosen this particular gas station for the same reason she chose everything now: strategic positioning. It sat at the intersection of 2 major highways, offered multiple escape routes, and had clear sightlines in all directions. Old habits from her operational days died hard, especially when those habits had kept her alive in places where American soldiers weren't supposed to exist. The gas station was supposed to be her sanctuary, a routine stop on the drive to her physical therapy appointment in Tucson. Here she could fill up her tank, grab a coffee, and blend into the background of ordinary American life, the life she'd fought to protect in a dozen different countries under missions that would never appear in any official record. But today, her sanctuary had been invaded. At 4:15 p.m., the rumble of 5 Harley-Davidson motorcycles shattered the desert quiet. The Diablos Motorcycle Club roared into Murphy's Corner Station like a plague of locusts, their bikes black and chrome, their leather vests bearing the skull and crossbones that had become synonymous with drug running and violence across 3 states. The leader dismounted first, a mountain of a man called Tank, 6'3" and north of 280 pounds, with arms like tree trunks covered in prison ink. His vest bore the President patch, and the scars on his knuckles spoke of violence that had been his profession long before motorcycles became his passion. Behind him came his crew, Razor, thin and wiry with the twitchy energy of a career meth cook, Bulldog, whose smashed face testified to too many fights with people who hit back, Snake, the enforcer whose dead eyes had seen too much killing, and Viper, the youngest at 25 but already marked by the kind of casual cruelty that made even hardened criminals uncomfortable. They owned this stretch of highway through fear and violence, and Murphy's Corner Station was just another place where decent people paid tribute to their presence through intimidation and silence. The 5 gang members spread out across the gas station with the practiced efficiency of predators who had done this dance before. They weren't here to buy gas or food, they were here to remind everyone in a 50-mile radius who owned this piece of desert. Tank positioned himself near the station's entrance, his massive frame blocking the doorway and trapping the elderly clerk inside. His presence alone was enough to make families with children quickly finish their transactions and flee without making eye contact. Razor and Snake took up positions near the other pumps, harassing customers with crude jokes and veiled threats until the decent people packed up and left, leaving only empty silence and fear behind. But it was Bulldog who first noticed Jessica, his attention drawn to her long dark hair and the way she sat with such unusual stillness beside her car. To him, she looked like entertainment, a pretty woman alone and apparently helpless. "Hey, Tank," he called out, his voice carrying the particular tone of a man who had found something interesting to break. "Check out the wheels on this one." Tank followed his gaze, and when his eyes landed on Jessica, something ugly spread across his face. In his world, disabled people were objects of ridicule, easy targets for the kind of casual cruelty that proved your dominance over those too weak to fight back. Well, Tank said, his voice booming across the gas station. "Look what we got here, boys. A little princess who can't even walk to the bathroom." The gang laughed. the sound harsh and predatory in the desert air. Other customers, the few brave enough to still be at the station, looked away in shame, too frightened to intervene but unable to completely ignore what was happening. Jessica continued fueling her car, her movements precise and economical. She'd heard worse than schoolyard insults in Kandahar province from Taliban fighters who'd captured two of her teammates. These bikers were loud, crude, and obvious, exactly the kind of threat that revealed itself before it could do real damage. But their attention was like a spotlight she couldn't escape, and she knew from experience that ignoring bullies rarely made them lose interest. It usually made them escalate. "Hey, cripple," Viper shouted, emboldened by his leader's attention. "You deaf too? Or just stupid?" Jessica finished filling her tank, replaced the nozzle with careful precision, and finally looked up. Her ocean blue eyes met Tank's gaze with the kind of calm that made something cold run down his spine, though he was too proud and too stupid to recognize the warning signs. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying a strange authority that seemed to cut through the desert heat, "I'm just trying to get gas and go home. There's no need for this." The 5 gang members burst into laughter, the sound cruel and mocking, but there was something about her voice, a quality that spoke of command, of someone accustomed to being obeyed in life and death situations. Tank, however, was too intoxicated by his own power to pay attention to subtleties. He'd spent 15 years building his reputation through intimidation, and a woman in a wheelchair wasn't going to be the one who made him look weak. "There's no need for this," he mimicked her tone. "Lady, there's every need for this. This is my highway, my gas station, and you show respect or you get taught respect." Without warning, he kicked over the small trash can beside her car, sending garbage scattering across the pavement and making her jump slightly, the first sign of reaction they'd managed to provoke. What happened next would be burned into the memory of everyone present for the rest of their lives. Tank, drunk on his own power and encouraged by his crew's laughter, reached down and grabbed the handles of Jessica's wheelchair. "Let's see how fast this thing goes," he sneered, and with a violent shove sent her rolling backward across the uneven pavement. Jessica's hands flew to the wheel rims, stopping herself before she could crash into the concrete barrier behind the station. The impact wasn't enough to hurt her. She'd endured far worse during SEAL training, but the violation was complete. For a moment, the only sound was the desert wind and the distant hum of highway traffic. Then slowly, Jessica began to roll her chair forward, back toward her car, back toward the 5 men who thought they had just established their dominance. But something had changed. The stillness around her was no longer peaceful. It was the quiet that comes before violence, the calm that predators recognize when they've finally pushed their prey too far. "That," Jessica said, her voice carrying across the gas station with deadly precision, "was a mistake." Tank laughed, but the sound was forced now, less confident. There was something in her tone and the way she sat in that chair that didn't match the victim he thought he was terrorizing.
"Yeah. What are you gonna do about it, princess? Call the cops?"
Jessica's right hand moved to her left wrist, her fingers touching the small tattoo that most people never noticed. The trident, the mark that meant she had survived Hell Week, completed underwater demolitions training, learned to kill in a dozen different ways, and earned the respect of the most elite warriors on Earth. "I don't need to call anyone," she said. "They're already on their way." It was a bluff, or so Tank assumed, but Jessica knew something he didn't. 3 miles down Highway 86, SEAL Team 7 was conducting desert warfare training exercises. Her old team, her brothers, and Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, the man who'd pulled her from the burning helicopter in Somalia, always kept his radio tuned to the emergency frequencies. The small GPS tracker in Jessica's medical alert bracelet had sent out a distress signal the moment Tank first grabbed her chair. It was a precaution her former commanding officer had insisted on, knowing that warriors who'd made enemies in the shadows sometimes found trouble in the most unexpected places. But Tank didn't know any of this. All he saw was a disabled woman making empty threats, and it made his rage burn hotter. "They're on their way," he mocked. "Who's coming, sweetheart? The wheelchair police?" His crew erupted in laughter again, but the sound was uglier now, more desperate. They were committed to this course of action, and backing down would mean losing face in front of people who respected nothing but strength. Razor pulled out his phone, starting to record. "This is going to be good for the gram," he said. "Diablo's teaching respect to cripples." But in the distance, if any of them had been listening, they might have heard it. The low thrum of diesel engines, the coordinated movement of military vehicles, the sound of America's most elite warriors responding to a threat against one of their own. The first sign that Tank's world was about to change came not as a sound, but as a feeling, a vibration in the ground that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Jessica felt it first, her trained senses recognizing the rhythmic pulse of military vehicles moving in formation. She closed her eyes briefly, and for just a moment she was back in Afghanistan, feeling the approach of rescue helicopters after 3 days behind enemy lines. Some sensations once learned were never forgotten. "You feel that?" Snake asked nervously, his drug-addled brain finally picking up on the subtle tremor in the pavement. Tank was too focused on his victim to pay attention to his subordinate's concerns. He grabbed Jessica's wheelchair again, this time lifting the front wheels off the ground and tilting her backward until she was forced to grip the armrests to keep from falling. "Feel what?" he snarled. "The only thing you need to worry about is showing this bitch some respect." But then they all heard it, the unmistakable sound of heavy vehicles approaching at high speed. Not civilian trucks or police cruisers, but the deep, purposeful rumble of military transports designed to carry warriors into battle. The first Humvee crested the hill overlooking Murphy's Corner Station at exactly 4:31 p.m. It was followed by another, then another, until 7 military vehicles formed a perfect tactical formation around the gas station. These weren't standard Army vehicles. They bore no identifying marks, carried no unit designations, flew no flags. They were the kind of transportation used by people who didn't exist in any official capacity. Tank's grip on Jessica's wheelchair loosened as he stared at the arriving vehicles. What the hell? The Humvees positioned themselves with military precision, each one covering a specific field of fire, each crew of 4 warriors ready to respond to any threat. From the lead vehicle, a man emerged who carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to command in the world's most dangerous places. Master Chief Petty Officer Carlos Rodriguez, 44 years old, was a man who had seen combat in every major conflict of the past 2 decades. His weathered face bore the scars of shrapnel from a Taliban IED, and his eyes held the calm authority of someone who had led missions that officially never happened. But behind him, 27 more warriors emerged from the vehicles. They wore civilian clothes, jeans, t-shirts, baseball caps, but there was no mistaking their nature. These were Navy SEALs, the quiet professionals, America's premier special operations force, and they moved with the coordinated precision of men who had conducted raids in the most hostile territory on Earth. Tank stared as the SEALs formed a loose perimeter around the gas station, their positioning casual to the untrained eye, but tactically perfect to anyone who understood small unit operations. They didn't draw weapons, didn't shout orders, didn't even appear particularly aggressive. They simply existed, and their presence changed everything. "Gentlemen," Master Chief Rodriguez said, his voice carrying easily across the gas station, "I think there's been a misunderstanding here." Tank's hand was still gripping Jessica's wheelchair when he turned to face the Master Chief, his brain struggling to process what was happening. 5 minutes ago, he'd been the undisputed king of this stretch of highway. Now he was surrounded by men who looked like they could end him without raising their pulse rates. "This is none of your business," Tank said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "We're just having a conversation with the lady here." Master Chief Rodriguez walked forward with measured steps, his eyes taking in the scene with the trained assessment of a professional warrior. He saw Jessica in her wheelchair, saw Tank's grip on the handles, saw the overturned trash can, and the fear in the eyes of the few civilian witnesses who remained. But most importantly, he saw the small tattoo on Jessica's wrist as she adjusted her position in the chair. The trident, the mark of a SEAL. His expression didn't change, but every operator in the perimeter understood the subtle shift in his posture. This wasn't just about protecting a civilian anymore. This was about protecting family. "Master Chief," Jessica said quietly, using the military rank that cut through all the civilian pretense. "It's good to see you again." The recognition rippled through the assembled SEALs like electricity. They'd heard about Martinez, the first female operator to earn the trident, the SEAL who'd conducted more successful deep reconnaissance missions than anyone in the modern era, the warrior who'd been medically retired after the helicopter crash in Somalia that should have killed her entire team. "The pleasure is mine, Petty Officer Martinez," Rodriguez replied, using her old rank with the respect it deserved. "I trust these gentlemen have been treating you with appropriate courtesy?" Tank's grip finally loosened completely as the implications crashed over him. The woman in the wheelchair wasn't just some random disabled person. She was military, elite military, and the 28 armed professionals surrounding him weren't random Good Samaritans. They were her brothers in arms. "We didn't know," Bulldog stammered, taking a step backward. "We didn't know she was—" "What?" Master Chief Rodriguez asked, his voice deadly quiet. "You didn't know she was what? A human being who deserved basic respect? Or did you think that because she uses a wheelchair, she was somehow less than you?" The question hung in the desert air like a blade. Around the perimeter, the SEALs maintained their positions, their casual stances belying the fact that each one could neutralize multiple targets in seconds. Jessica wheeled her chair forward slightly, positioning herself between the Master Chief and Tank. Even now, even after being humiliated and threatened, her instinct was to de-escalate, to find a solution that didn't end in violence. Master Chief, she said, perhaps we could resolve this peacefully. Rodriguez nodded, but his eyes never left Tank's face. Of course, petty officer. These gentlemen are going to apologize to you properly, and then they're going to leave this gas station and never return. Isn't that right, mister? Tank, the gang leader mumbled. His earlier swagger completely evaporated. My name's Tank. Well, Mr. Tank, Rodriguez said, I think you have something to say to Petty Officer Martinez. The silence stretched across the gas station like a wire under tension. 28 elite warriors watched and waited as Tank struggled with his pride, his fear, and the growing realization that he'd made the worst mistake of his violent life. Tank looked around the gas station, taking in the faces of the men who surrounded him. These weren't weekend warriors or police officers who might be intimidated by his reputation. These were the kind of professionals who eliminated high-value targets in countries that Americans couldn't pronounce. But it was Jessica who spoke first, her voice carrying across the desert silence with surprising gentleness. You want to know what really happened to me? She asked, looking directly at Tank. 3 years ago, I was leading a reconnaissance mission in Somalia. My team was extracting American hostages from a terrorist compound when our helicopter was shot down. I could have died that day, probably should have died. Instead, I survived, but my legs didn't. She gestured to her wheelchair with no trace of self-pity. This chair isn't a sign of weakness. It's a reminder that I gave everything I had to serve this country, and I'd do it again tomorrow if I could. Master Chief Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice taking on the tone of a commander briefing his troops. Ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at one of the finest operators this country has ever produced. Petty Officer Martinez completed 47 combat missions behind enemy lines. She rescued American hostages, eliminated terrorist threats, and saved more lives than we'll ever be able to count. Tank's face had gone pale, but Rodriguez wasn't finished. The last mission she flew, she stayed in that helicopter for an extra 30 seconds to make sure every member of her team could jump to safety. 30 seconds while taking enemy fire from an RPG. Those 30 seconds cost her the use of her legs, but they saved the lives of 7 Navy SEALs who went home to their families because of her sacrifice. The gas station was completely silent now. Even the desert winds seemed to have stopped blowing. Tank stared at Jessica with growing comprehension and shame. The wheelchair doesn't make her weak, Rodriguez continued. It makes her one of the strongest people you'll ever meet. And when you grabbed her chair, when you shoved her around like she was nothing, you weren't just attacking a disabled woman. You were attacking a warrior who has given more for this country than you could ever understand. Tank's legs seemed to give out beneath him. He sank to his knees beside Jessica's wheelchair. His head bowed, his massive frame shaking with what might have been tears. Ma'am, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't know. If you'd known, you might have acted differently. Jessica replied, her voice gentle but firm. But the question is, why does it take knowledge of my service record for you to treat me with basic human dignity? The question cut deeper than any physical blow could have. Tank had no answer because there was no good answer. Master Chief Rodriguez knelt down beside Tank, bringing himself to eye level with the gang leader. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of experience earned in the world's most dangerous places. Son, you made a mistake today. A big one. But mistakes can be opportunities to learn, to grow, to become better than you were. The question is, what are you going to do with this opportunity? Tank looked up at Jessica, then at the SEALs surrounding him, then back at the woman whose strength he'd completely misjudged. How do I make this right? He asked. Jessica considered the question carefully. She could have demanded punishment, could have pressed charges, could have let her brothers handle this in the way that special operations teams handled threats to their family. But that wasn't who she was, and it wasn't what her service had been about. You learn from this, she said finally. You remember that every person you meet is fighting battles you can't see. You treat people with respect not because of what they can do for you, but because they're human beings who deserve dignity. Tank nodded frantically. Yes, ma'am. Yes, I will. I promise. And your friends, Jessica continued, looking at the other 4 gang members who were watching the scene with obvious shock. They learned to. This stops here. The intimidation, the bullying, the casual cruelty, it stops. It stops, Tank repeated. I swear it stops. Master Chief Rodriguez stood up, offering Tank a hand to help him to his feet. There's something else you need to understand. Petty Officer Martinez isn't just a hero because of what she did in the military. She's a hero because of how she's living her life now. She volunteers at the VA hospital, counseling other wounded warriors. She speaks at schools, teaching kids about service and sacrifice. She's making this world better every single day. Tank accepted the offered hand, rising to his feet with obvious effort. His gang members gathered around him, all of them looking like men who had just seen their entire worldview challenged. "Ma'am," Tank said to Jessica, "is there anything I can do? Anything at all?" Jessica smiled for the first time since the confrontation began, and the expression transformed her entire face. "There is, actually. Murphy's Corner Station could use some regular customers who treat the staff with respect and make this a safe place for families to stop. Think you and your friends could handle that responsibility?" Tank straightened up, some of his natural leadership asserting itself in a positive direction for perhaps the first time in years. "Yes, ma'am, we can handle that. This place is going to be the safest gas station in 3 states." The SEALs began to withdraw as quietly as they'd arrived, their vehicles starting up with disciplined precision. But before leaving, each team member stopped to pay their respects to Jessica, some offering salutes, others simply nodding with the deep respect that warriors show to those who have proven themselves in battle. Master Chief Rodriguez was the last to go. He placed a gentle hand on Jessica's shoulder and spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. "You know you don't have to face this stuff alone, right? Anytime, any place you call us, we're family, Martinez. Always will be." Jessica nodded, fighting back tears. "I know, Master Chief, and thank you." As the convoy disappeared over the hill, the gas station slowly returned to normal. Other customers began to arrive, families with children who would never know how close they'd come to witnessing something much uglier than what actually transpired. Tank and his crew mounted their motorcycles, but before leaving, their leader walked over to Jessica one more time. "Ma'am," he said, his voice filled with genuine respect. "Thank you for your service, and thank you for teaching me something important today." Jessica nodded. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were yesterday. As the Diablos rode away, their engines no longer sounded like threats, but like promises. Promises of protection, of respect, of a highway where decent people could travel without fear. Jessica finished her business at the gas station and prepared to drive to her physical therapy appointment. But as she transferred into her car, she noticed something different about the look she was receiving from other customers. Not pity, not discomfort, but respect. Word was already spreading about what had happened here, about the woman in the wheelchair who had turned 5 bullies into protectors through nothing more than her own quiet strength. "Before you go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed someone being judged unfairly because of how they looked or moved through the world? Have you ever been that person? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else who needs to hear it. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that heroes come in all forms, hit that subscribe button. Because everyone deserves to have their story told, and everyone deserves to be seen for who they really are, not just what they appear to be,